Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, and members of West Slope. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you about some of the things that concern me, and I think ought to concern everyone in the state of Oregon. We had a pretty hard time with COVID, and I realize that that's a factor in a lot of things that we've experienced. But before I get into more meatier stuff, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Oregon. I actually spent 6 out of my first 7 years in Marlene Village in Washington County. When my parents moved us to Southwest Portland, I now reside about 2 blocks away from where my parents used to live. I have a wife and 3 children.
Carrying on a bit, do you want to just listen?
I have a wife and 3 children, and I graduated from the University of Oregon with a BS in political science and a master's in political science from Portland State University. And my last job position was with IBM in 2018 when I retired from IBM. So let me talk to you a little bit about the way I feel about this election. I think that you definitely have a choice between the 2 of us. I have a Republican opponent, so I might not be the one that she faces in November. So I can't promise you that, but I'm working diligently to try and make that the case. I'd like to start out by reading something from Willamette Week from March 30th edition. It's actually an article on Tina Kotek, but it to me represents some of the conflicts and some of the challenges that we face as Oregonians moving ahead. It begins some indicators such as K through 12 test scores, the housing shortage and inadequate provisions of mental health services suggest the state remains deeply troubled. And then it quotes a former state representative. We are a high tax state with low services, adds former state representative Jules Bailey, Democrat, Portland. Shit's not working. And I apologize for the language, but that's what she said. And then Kotek herself later on uses that very same phrase. And there is a lot that's not working in this state for the people, for the most vulnerable people, especially. I think that we have to begin with the idea that Oregon would be better off changing directions from where it currently is heading, which is for more of the same. I think that the state of Oregon needs to change course because we've had a certain amount of complacency and the same people running things in government for the last 10 years at least. I think the first level of hope for us is that we can change the competency in the government by changing people who can offer a diverse opinion on how to improve Oregon's standing. Let me give you an example. Back in 2009, Oregon was gifted with $86 million to repair its or improve its software in the employment department computer. Move forward to 2020, and where are we? They had spent $4 million of that $86 million. The computer was not working properly or was not able to work the way they wanted it to work. They still had most of the money to use, but we had an enormous crunch of unemployed people due to COVID coming into the employment department. And in the end, that computer was not upgraded to the point where it was flexible enough to make the changes that it needed to make the change in order to support the thousands and thousands of people who are applying for unemployment. Consequently, the governor fired the person she had recently hired to run that department and assigned the number 2 in command to take over. And what they ended up doing was a very slow manual process that meant that people were not going to get the checks that they needed to support themselves. This is a problem in Oregon. We have people who get checks that don't deserve them, and we've also got people who deserve checks and don't get them. So there's a problem at every level of government. It happens over and over again. We can go back even to the original Oregon Health Authority computer system, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And that money was wasted because nobody could put together a computer system the way the state wanted. And there was a whole lawsuit with Oracle that was running that process. And I could point to many other examples of poor management on the part of Oregon's leadership at that time up until this very moment. Over and over again, we've seen the wrong actions taken in order to try and solve problems that they themselves have created. And there's much more to be said on that. We've had children who are supposed to be under the care of the state put up in offices or hotels briefly, or even sent out of state. It goes on and on, the list of competencies that the state lacks. We have, as the article suggested, poor educational opportunities for our children. Mine have gone through school. The youngest is at Oregon State University. So I know how challenging the school system can be. And I know that we need to make changes in the way we operate in the state, because in fact, the teachers union runs the state. Whenever it wants something, it pretty much gets it. One exception might have been a PERS change that they didn't like, but it was just a matter of kicking the can down the road in that case a few years ago. So I think beyond competency, there is a level of taxation, and mentioned also in that comment, that has been damaging to every Oregonian, but especially to the poorest and the weakest ones among us who depend on day-to-day income and aren't able to get that kind of income that they need, because they are being pushed to the limit where they have to find a home somewhere. And some of the reason for why we see tent people and RV people around our state is because they've been pushed as a result of high taxation. Taxation is corrosive after the point where you get the necessary things done. And as that article suggests, we need to find a better way besides simply taxing people with carbon tax or whatever that might, in the end, push them out of their apartments or make a choice between eating and having a shelter. I think there's a big difference between me and the way that Darcia has voted in the legislature. And I think there's a void of leadership that needs to be reestablished in the state on a number of fronts. I don't agree with the way education is being handled in Oregon. I believe that parents have the sovereignty over their children. I don't believe that they should be indoctrinated through means that are not transparent to the parents. I believe that we ought to be able to know what our children are being taught, and it ought to be incorporated into state law. I believe that transparency is a good idea for every part of government, including journalism's need to know, and citizens' right to know what's going on in their state. The state's budget is known to be very difficult and problematic as far as understanding what's going on within the state. We can do changes. We can make changes if we audit these different parts of the government to the point where we understand what's going on, so we don't have an 11-year gap between when it receives money and when it's supposed to have, when it does have actually a big need for the success of that program. I'd also like to mention public safety, which I believe is on the mind of many people. We need police honoring their code, but we should stop demonizing the police, and we should not engage in tropes that tends to sound like racism when we talk about the police. And fortunately, some of that happens within our government, although they're a bit more circumspect with regard to their own language when they're talking among themselves. So, not sure how much time I have left, but I'll continue on. I think there are solutions to these problems. I think that homelessness can be solved. So far, the big bureaucratic effort has not worked. We have not solved this problem, and I think it can be pushed along since people have provided for a considerable amount of money to be spent on helping the poorest among us and developing a better approach than the one that simply has not appeared yet. We are headed for a disaster in PERS, and that's a major problem that lurks behind the scenes because it requires more money coming in than what it receives because the assumptions are underlying PERS are wrong. I'd like to mention one more thing with regard to the comments that appeared on the representative's website. It reads, "This nation was built on the backs and lives of brown and black bodies, and to this day, the depths of systemic racism run deep and wide." And so I believe the nation was built by many people of many races. I don't believe it was limited to two. I think that's a misreading of history, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running, because I think that history is being used and misused to guide our children, sometimes in the guise of social emotional learning, or SEL as they call it. I believe that the idea of systemic racism is simply to gin up conflict between people. And I believe that we need to tone things down and stop with the rhetoric. If you can name who the racists are, let me know. My tendency is to think that they are the people who are in charge, who are running things. And it's not merely a matter of calling names with regard to people, whether it's the police or whether it's just a supposed systemic racism. There are disparities between blacks and whites and others. There are disparities because of various social and sometimes political factors. We ought to be addressing the teachers' union and the way they are running things with regard to education. I'm not trying to point fingers just at one group or one section of the people of Oregon, but I'm pointing the finger at the people who are running things now, because I believe that Oregon can be a better place to live, a better place to raise our children and educate our children. I believe that the state of Oregon, if we approach it with a different point of view, will be made into one of the shining stars among the 50 that rest on the flag that we all salute. Hopefully we all salute, because this is the greatest nation in the world, and we should not be demeaning it. We should be making it better. We should not be attacking people systemically racist or any other such tropes that pop up as a result of guilt and finger pointing. So I hope you'll accept this as a hopeful message, even though I pointed out a lot of the flaws, because we can solve these problems. The solution is not always money. The solution sometimes is to work better together and to work with a better perspective than what we've seen in the many years that the same people have been running government. The government political monopoly should end in November. And I thank you very much for the time that you've given me. I fully appreciate it. And if there are any questions with regard to my statements or campaign, please feel free to contact me. The information is available on the state website. So thank you very much.
You're muted, Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I just mentioned that there's a nice photo of the blue door up in Manuka there in your background.
I thought you'd recognize
of that door before.
Yeah, I thought you'd recognize that, but I wasn't going to say anything unless you did.
All right, thank you very much. And Representative Grayber, thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I really appreciate everyone sticking around tonight and waiting through for this. And thanks for having me on. And thank you to Mr. Castles for stepping up and running, I believe, that contested elections where we have to really distill our values, make us better in the long run. So my name is Darcia Grayber, and I am a resident of Southwest Portland. I am currently the state representative for House District 35, which is Tigard in Southwest Portland. And the new House District, of course, will be Southwest Portland and pieces of East Beaverton. I am just finishing up my first term. So many of the issues we talked about, I actually am in agreement with Mr. Castles. We absolutely need more transparency and accountability. And I'm proud of the work I've done in my first term. So I currently serve as the chair of the Veterans and Emergency Management Committee. I'm vice chair on Business and Labor. I serve as Public Safety, Ways and Means as a member, and also in wildfire recovery. And I was just recently elected to leadership as an assistant majority leader. So it's been a busy first term for me, and I'm very proud of some of the work we've gotten done. But before I dive into that, I just want to also give you a little personal background. When we are not in session in the legislature, I am a professional firefighter. So I do serve with TVF&R, and I have over 22 years of service in the fire service. In fact, I did my probation in West Slope when we opened the brand new fire station when I joined TVF&R. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. Things like, wow, we really need some sidewalks. So yeah, and I also understand that West Slope's a really unique neighborhood. I've spent some time talking to the mayor of Beaverton, and in some ways I know that the neighborhood can feel like you're in a little bit of no man's land. So, you know, you have schools with PPS, you've got City of Beaverton government, part of it is unincorporated Washington County, you've got so it gets very confusing, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to actually help define the neighborhood and help people feel like they're being heard and that some of that infrastructure is being grown. But that's just from a neighborhood standpoint. When I'm not in the session or firefighting, I am a mom of 4. So I have 4 teenagers, 2 which are in college now, 2 still at home. I like to be busy. So in my first session, I was very proud to actually work in a very bipartisan manner to champion some bills that helped all Oregonians. Some of the things that we worked on included Senate Bill 762, which is the wildfire recovery bill. And I'm looking forward to actually hosting a town hall this summer on how to make our homes and our neighborhoods more fire resilient, because I think everyone in this state in 2020 fires was really impacted by what could happen. And in that first session, you know, my first long session, I was figuring things out. And, you know, again, Mr. Castles brought up that point about the employment division. And I was one of the people calling for accountability with that. You are absolutely right. We absolutely have to invest in that infrastructure. And what happened was shameful. The fact that the people that were most in need of relief were not able to get relief should never happen again. In the short session, we actually had a really productive short section that we did work in a very bipartisan manner. And I want to talk about some of the investments that were made, which will affect not only everyone in Oregon, but people, of course, in the West Slope neighborhood. So, for example, $400 million package to tackle housing and homelessness. It's hard when we see these, you know, we've all been impacted by COVID, and COVID peeled the veil off of what was working and what wasn't in the state. And so we've made these historic investments, and I feel the urgency when I, you know, go through downtown Portland, or I'm out on calls seeing people who are struggling with addiction. We need to make sure that these people are helped, but it doesn't get built overnight. So that $400 million means building treatment centers, detox centers, wraparound services for folks who are unhoused. And that's something that is in the works, but I think we really won't see the full fruition of that because of the investment and the time it takes for several years. So it's hard to tell people, be patient, this is coming, but I do think that you're going to see a tremendous push in that. I've got a lot of paper in front of me with all these things. It's like, wow, we put a lot of money towards things. In the last 2 years, there have been no new taxes that the state legislature has voted on. So there were taxes with Metro and with the cities, but the state legislature has not passed new taxes. And in fact, we've actually pushed for bills like House Bill 4015 to offer bigger loans to startups and small businesses in addition to COVID business assistance. We invested $200 million in the short session in a workforce development bill. I was a leader on that, and I'm so proud of that. That's going to be bringing people into healthcare, into the tech industry, and funding apprenticeships and bringing more people who've fallen out of the workforce back in, including with supportive services like childcare for moms that had to fall out because they had to stay home and take care of their children. I'm going to try to keep it short here. We've invested $15 million in community-based gun violence reduction programs. So, you know, we know I was one of the architects of Senate Bill 554, which I know a lot of my Republican colleagues really don't like, and that called for secure storage of firearms. So keeping your firearms locked. That was something that was very important to me as a 20-year paramedic who's been on far too many children who've had who've been killed. So right now, though, that investment was in upstream assistance to folks. So preventing family-based violence, having folks that go to the hospital that have been shot, making sure there's not retaliation within that community. That's something, you know, that we're seeing more and more in Portland. We invested $300 million in the education package, $100 million to expand access to childcare and rebuilding the childcare workforce, $100 million climate resilience package that will help deal with things like extreme heat and extreme ice and cooling events. Oh, look, other folks have joined. And then nearly $300 million cost of living relief package. So again, we have a long way to go, but we've made these investments, and I'm so proud of the work that we're doing, and I'm asking for your vote to keep us moving forward. I feel like I'm just getting started, and I have big shoes to fill, certainly, but thank you. I don't want to, I know you have more candidates on, so I will kind of shorten it right there and yield the rest of my time to them because it's been a long night for everyone.
All right, thank you very much, Representative Grayber.
Oh, actually, and I did want to address one more thing, Joe. I'm sorry. Mr. Castles brought up a section on my website talking about Black Lives Matter, and I absolutely support that concept. And I don't think it should be controversial to address the very real racism that's involved in the construction of this country. And yes, so many people came together to build this country, and I'm very proud of that. I had the opportunity today to very briefly meet the President of the United States, and he said something which impacted me so deeply, and that was, we are the only country in the world which was founded on ideals and not geographical boundaries. And that resonated with me in a way where I think that we can acknowledge the imperfection of those of how we've sometimes operated as a society and work to better ourselves. So just wanted to address that head on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, well, Mr. Decker and Mr. Barton, you may have missed the excitement. The Zoom link was not working at all for many minutes. So perhaps you've been able to avoid the agony of that, because I'm glad you're able to come in. So we'll go right to you folks. You have 15 minutes each. And I just arbitrarily went alphabetical, which as a Whittington is anathema, but I just did it alphabetically anyway. So Mr. Barton, we'll let you go first. You have 15 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Whittington. I appreciate the time, and thank you, all of you. It's good to see you all. Representative Grayber, it's good to see you. I am your Washington County District Attorney, and I'm running for re-election because I want to keep our county safe. That is the mission of the DA. It is to ensure that we all can live, work, and raise a family in safety. I live here. I went to high school in Washington County. My wife and I are raising our family here. We live in the Sherwood area, and we want our family to be safe, and we want your family to be safe as well. I was first elected in 2018. Before that, I served as a prosecutor in the Washington County DA's office, and I spent most of my time prosecuting child abuse cases, child sex abuse primarily, child physical abuse cases. But I've handled just about every type of case there is in the DA's office, everything from a low-level theft case all the way up to homicide cases and significant person crime, robbery, sexual assault cases. And in doing that, I've learned and I understand how important the work a DA's office does, because it's really about helping out the victims that we serve every day. And we serve about 12,000 crime victims in our office annually. My priorities as DA are very simple. The same priorities I ran on in 2018 when I won. And they are to prosecute criminals, to protect the community and crime victims, and to pursue reforms that are responsible. And we have done just that in the last 4 years. Washington County is the safest large county in the state. The crime rates prove it. If you look at the combined property and violent crime rate in Washington County and compare it to every other county, you'll see that we are 30% lower than the state average. And we're a whopping 50% lower than what's happening right now in Multnomah County. And alongside that safety, we have also taken great steps in the last 4 years as I've been DA to improve and reform and better our criminal justice system. So things I'm very proud of are adding new specialty and treatment courts that address the root cause of criminal behavior, things like our Veterans Treatment Court or drug courts, things that provide additional services for people that have complicated issues going on in their lives. We have the county's first and only the state's first and only county-based hate crimes team, a bias team to address hate and bias crimes, a cold case unit that we've established to go after and try and solve unsolved homicides and sexual assault cases going back to the 70s, a domestic violence unit that I started 3 years ago to address domestic violence issues. We started Oregon's first and only diversity legal job fair to help increase the diversity, not just in our office, but in the legal community. And something I'm especially proud of is we're working to establish what's called the Family Peace Center of Washington County, which is a unique effort to try and address child abuse and domestic violence. So kids and young adults that have experienced trauma, because we know all the science shows that the more work you can do with people when they're younger to address that trauma, the less likelihood there will be that they are dealing with issues like mental health issues or addiction or even criminal behavior when they're older. And I think things like that, those programs that I'm talking about are examples of responsible criminal justice reform. And those alongside the things we've done to keep our county safe, I think make it so that we live in a good place, a safe place. I'm endorsed by all public safety leaders in the county, the sheriff, every single police chief, every single police officers association. I'm endorsed by 11 current and former mayors of Washington County, former Governor Kulingoski, business leaders like Tim Boyle of Columbia Sportswear, Pat Reeser of Reeser's Foods, the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, Democrats and Republicans, and over 20 elected DAs throughout the state, and 2 former United States attorneys for Oregon. And what I've learned in my time as DA is you can't do this on your own. And it's with that support and collaboration and trust from the leaders and the public safety community that I think we can keep our county safe as we're dealing with a lot of the difficult challenges and the rising crime that we're seeing coming into our county. And I'd love to continue to be your district attorney as we go through the next 4 years. Love to answer any questions as well. And I'm sure my opponent's going to say lots of things. This is the umpteenth Zoom that he and I have done together. So I could probably give his speech for him, but he wouldn't like that. And I'll just say this, I disagree with a lot of what my opponent says, and I certainly take issue with what he's about to tell you about me. And I'd love to have the chance to answer any questions anyone has after he speaks. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Attorney Barton. So, yeah, you have about 10 minutes left of the 15-minute time. So I'm not sure how it works on here. Franziska, if someone has a question, do they just click the raise hand?
Yeah, so
if people that
folks
are
have a
not
question,
on the video. Okay,
yeah,
have any
just
questions?
the raise hand function.
Okay, yeah, so you can click the raise hand down at the bottom.
He said he'd like to answer after the other man gave his.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe if it's okay, and I don't mean to tell you how to do it, but if Mr. Decker says a few words, then we can have an opportunity to respond if something comes up.
Okay, that would be fine.
I've also given everybody the permission to talk, so they can unmute themselves to ask a question after the candidates are done.
All right, thank you, Franziska. All right, Mr. Decker, you're up.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for inviting me here. I'm Brian Decker. I'm running for district attorney. I am a fellow resident of Beaverton. I live in the Highland neighborhood. My daughter's in first grade at Vose. My mom lives down the road in the Vose neighborhood. I was a federal prosecutor during the Obama administration. I was an assistant United States attorney, and I have been a public defender for 4.5 years here in Washington County. I am running for district attorney because I believe we need a change. I've seen a lot of problems in our community. Gun crime is up over the last 4 years, and community trust in public safety is down. We are not doing enough to address our crises of homelessness and addiction and mental illness. In fact, they're getting worse, and victims and survivors are not getting the support that they need. I have worked as a lawyer on all sides of the criminal justice system, and that's why I am able to see the way that it works and the fixes that it needs from many different perspectives. In addition to my work as a federal prosecutor and a public defender, I volunteered to represent domestic violence victims seeking restraining orders. And back in the day, I volunteered to represent detainees at Guantanamo Bay. When I've been a public defender here in Washington County, which I was until I launched this campaign, I have been helping poor adults and children who are accused of crimes get access to justice, navigate the court system, protect their constitutional rights. And as a federal prosecutor, I took on crimes like human trafficking and gun trafficking and drug trafficking and destroying natural resources. And one of the things I've learned from all of these perspectives is that the prosecutors wield this immense power. It's called, and it sounds like legalese, I don't know if you've heard it before, it's called prosecutorial discretion. And what it means is the power to make all sorts of decisions that impact the outcomes of criminal cases. What crimes are going to be charged, who's going to be charged, when those charges will be filed, what plea bargains will be offered, what sentences to recommend, whether to insist on somebody sitting around in jail on cash bail, or to object or not object to their release before their day in court. All of those decisions taken together are called prosecutorial discretion. And the way that the system has developed over the past few decades, that power makes the district attorney into the most powerful, the most important office in the criminal justice system. Those decisions have a bigger impact on cases than any that are made by police detectives or victims in cases or even judges. The district attorney's office's decisions drive the outcomes of cases. And so what you need to be asking yourself is how is this responsibility going to be wielded, and what does it look like to wield it responsibly? Here's my priorities for it. Number one, I want to prioritize prevention. Addiction and mental illness and homelessness and poverty more broadly, these are things that are driving people into crime. Crimes of desperation, I call them. Not all crime is caused by those things, but an awful lot of people get involved in the criminal justice system because of root causes like this. And smart public safety policy means getting out in front of them, preventing crimes before they occur. And when you have people in the criminal justice system, prioritizing rehabilitation, rehabilitating nonviolent offenders away from criminal behavior and away from incarceration, which when used unnecessarily makes things worse, drives up crime, makes people into better criminals. We shouldn't be prioritizing incarceration. It should be the last resort when rehabilitation doesn't work. Number two, serving victims, serving survivors. People who have been harmed by crime deserve a voice in the criminal justice system, no matter who they are, no matter what their background, no matter how messy their lives or their feelings about the case, they deserve a voice. Ensuring equal justice for all. I will enforce the highest ethical standards in our office, and I will address racial discrimination to ensure everyone is treated fairly. And real public safety and accountability. No one should get special treatment, and no one is above the law. My opponent, Kevin Barton, has been the district attorney for 4 years. He has promised to enact some responsible reforms, kind of tacitly suggested that he will drive our criminal justice system in a more moderate direction and you know, sees at least a bit of the sort of progressive reformer mantle that has become so popular, but do it responsibly and make things more moderate. And instead, he has made us more extreme. Washington County is now the most punitive county in the state. We send more people to Oregon's prisons for more years than any other county in the state. We were number 4 when Kevin Barton took over, and we've increased all the way up to number 1. Kevin Barton has increased the rate at which we charge youth as juvenile delinquents, as opposed to diverting them into community service or anything else. The rate at which we do that by 53% in the time that he has been in office. I was in juvenile defense my first year as a public defender in Washington County, and I saw teens charged with felonies for things like borrowing their parents' car without permission or using their parents' car without permission. And it wasn't the upper middle class white kids who were charged as juvenile delinquents for that with felonies. And doing that is bad for them, but it's bad for us. The evidence shows that unnecessarily taking youth into the juvenile justice system makes it much more likely that they end up in the adult criminal justice system. We shouldn't be criminalizing and institutionalizing and felonizing things that are typical adolescent misbehavior. One of the ways I've seen Kevin Barton's office fail most palpably is in this recent case you may have heard in the news of a nurse at Coffee Creek Prison named Tony Klein, who allegedly sexually assaulted dozens of women. And he has now been charged by the federal prosecutors for sexual assault of many women who were in custody at Coffee Creek Women's Prison. That case was originally presented to the Washington County District Attorney's Office. And the Washington County District Attorney's Office took a look at it and decided there is insufficient evidence to prosecute this case. They decided not to prosecute him. And they did it without seeking further investigation. They did it without even going and talking to the women to decide whether or not there was enough evidence to prosecute him. And what they meant when they said there's not enough evidence is that they did not think that the women who had been sexually assaulted were credible. They did not think that they could be believed, and that they did not think that they could be believed because they had criminal histories, because they were felons. Because once people categorized as criminals, as felons, they're somehow different than the rest of us, and they don't get the same treatment as anybody else. Who could believe them? The federal prosecutors answered that question. The federal prosecutors did the job that the Washington County District Attorney's Office should have done, and ran down the evidence that they had, actually talked to the women, and decided to file charges against this guy just last month. In the interim, he kept working as a nurse, not in Coffee Creek, but at Legacy. I don't think that that's serving victims well. I don't think that that is upholding principles of not giving anybody special treatment. I think that we need to treat people fairly. I think that we need to respect that victims come in all shapes and sizes and have all sorts of messy backgrounds, and they still deserve treatment as human beings in the system. Everybody deserves to be treated with equal human dignity in the system. One more example of a way I think that Kevin Barton has failed is that he was rebuked by the Court of Appeals for engaging in jury selection in a racist way, for removing a Black man who is going to be a juror from a jury, and doing it for no reason that stood up to scrutiny other than the man's race. That's not something that happens every day, that a Court of Appeals reverses a case for that particular reason. It's called a Batson challenge, which is legalese, but it means we have a right to pick juries that are not this historically like Jim Crow, lily white juries that are not striking jurors based on race. And we do it through this legal process called a Batson challenge. It does not happen every day that cases get reversed on Batson challenges. It has happened twice in the history of Oregon. And the one time it has happened to our elected district attorney. He was the guy in the room who struck the juror based on race. And that alone ought to be disqualifying for a public official elected in Oregon, Washington County, the most diverse county in Oregon in 2022. And it's not only that, but the Court of Appeals extensively quoted him and called him out because he went on this temper tantrum in the courtroom, calling the defense attorney racist for challenging him, calling the defense attorney racist for suggesting that a Black man deserved to be on a jury. The Court of Appeals called him out, and it's not often that a Court of Appeals calls out a trial lawyer for their behavior in the courtroom, but that's what they did. And they said, after quoting him, they said, if Batson, if this system for ensuring equal protection in our juries is ever going to live up to its promise to protect our rights in court, then we cannot allow court to devolve into what happened here, into what Kevin Barton turned that courtroom into. It is unprofessional. It is prosecutorial misconduct. And we can't be playing games with safety and justice. These things are too important. That case was too important to cheat with in the courtroom. We need to be doing things the right way. We need to be managing cases the right way. I know that this change that I'm talking about getting out in front of these issues, about building treatment programs and making sure that we prioritize rehabilitation and prevention. I know that I can't make this change alone. I've got to collaborate with other people, but that's what I'm going to do. That's what a leader does, is be collaborative. I believe that we can work together, that we can work with the whole community to build a system that works for everyone. I have, throughout this campaign, done outreach to community groups and elected officials and community leaders across our county. I have the support of our mayor of Beaverton, Lacey Beatty. I have the support of Beaverton Education Association, who know that educators and district attorneys need to work together to interrupt the school to prison pipeline. I have the support of groups like Latino Network and APANO, the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon. I have the support of city councilors and school board members and community leaders from across the county, from Forest Grove to Sherwood, and all sorts of places in between, because this change needs to happen, and we can make it happen together.
All right, thank you very much. So we still have some time for questions.
Mr. Whittington, would it be possible for me to use any of my remaining time to answer some of the accusations that were made?
You can.
Wonderful, thank you. I do want to leave plenty of time for questions, but it's difficult to sit here when so many things are said that are so false, and it's hard to know where to start. Let me start with the most recent claims first. I have never been found to have engaged in any type of misconduct. I have a spotless ethical record. Yes, it is true. There's a case I handled 7 years ago where I used one of our challenges to do what's called bumping a juror during jury selection. I made the decision to challenge a juror or bump that juror before the juror walked in the room. I didn't know what his race was. The trial judge agreed with me that it was an appropriate use of the challenge. The case was appealed. The Court of Appeals disagreed, and they reversed the case. The Attorney General's office agreed with me as well. And the Court of Appeals applied a new legal analysis to that when they reversed the case. I've been asked to work with actually one of the judges on that Court of Appeals panel, along with other judges, to help improve our jury selection rules to make sure it's fair. There's nothing I did that was improper or illegal or unethical. Everything I've always done throughout my career is just that, it's legal and ethical. My own family isn't white. My wife and children are not white. Making sure we have a good, strong, and diverse community is a very important issue for me. This Coffee Creek case that you hear about, in 2018, our office reviewed a case. I didn't personally handle it. In fact, it came in before I was the DA, but when I was the DA, we made a decision on the case. The decision was we didn't have enough evidence to file charges. We did work with the police to try and find additional evidence. We worked with them to review search warrants to find additional evidence. But we didn't have it available, and the feds didn't have it either. After we were done with the case, the federal government initiated an FBI investigation, and 3 years later, after that FBI investigation, they finally did have enough evidence to file charges. And they also had a deposition that occurred after we had the case, so statements from the suspect after us. I've spoken to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They agree they didn't have the evidence, and neither did we in 2018 to file charges. I'm glad they can now. I believe that we've got some major challenges here in Washington County when it comes to ensuring we keep this safe. But I think that having someone who makes accusations and falsehoods and misrepresents both his own record and my record is not the way to keep our county safe, which is why I've got the support of all of our Washington County public safety leadership. Now I'd love to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No, I have not.
All right, Terry, you have your hand up. You're muted.
She's not.
Okay,
There you go.
thanks. Fortunately, I have never been the victim of a crime, knock on wood. But I read a lot of discussions about, I guess I'll call them petty crimes. Car break-ins, stolen cars, stolen items, catalytic converter stolen. Can both of you comment on what seems to be petty criminals? How do we address that? To me, because I think, but for a lot of folks, that can be the most annoying kinds of crime. And it seems like there's a revolving door where folks that conduct petty crime basically make a career out of it. And how would you address that situation?
I'm happy to jump in and address that first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think there are, first of all, when you think about a DA's office, a lot of times people think about the big cases, the murder, the robbery. But the reality in Washington County, we are fortunate enough that most people are not victims of those big crimes and those terrible cases. More people are victims of what you call the petty crimes, what I'm going to call the quality of life crimes, the lower level thefts, the car break-ins, the things along those lines. Those crimes are every bit as important as the big crimes to making sure we have a good, strong, safe community. And you can see what happens in a community where those crimes are not arrested and prosecuted. That's what's happening in Portland right now. In Washington County, I think there's 3 challenges that we're facing that impact those quality of life crimes. The first is addiction. Addiction is rising and it's out of control. And we need to get a handle on that. And it's not just a Washington County problem. It's a region, statewide, national problem, but it's especially acute here in Oregon. And part of that is the state has made some very bad decisions when it comes to not providing the sufficient resources for treatment. And we had a change in our law about a year and a half ago that decriminalized drug use in Oregon without providing more treatment. The law said it would provide more treatment and it didn't. That's called Ballot Measure 110. And it's been the subject of numerous newspaper articles about how chaotic and how much of a failure it's been so far. Addiction drives a lot of quality of life crimes. So we need to get a handle on that. We're doing it with specialty courts and treatment courts, and the county has something called the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, which is coming online soon. We need to do more of that. Second issue, resources. We have the second smallest jail in the state per capita. We need a jail that's large enough to fit Washington County's needs so that when the police do catch the person stealing your catalytic converter or your package or breaking into your car, they can arrest them and take them to the jail. They can't do that right now for everyone because the jail is too small, second smallest in the state per capita. What that means is the jail is housing more dangerous individuals, but those petty criminals, the quality of life criminals, commit crime after crime again. And that's a result of the improper funding that the county hasn't provided enough resources. Third issue is crime from Portland. We are seeing rising crime coming into Washington County from Portland. You can ask any police officer or any police leader in the county and they'll tell you the same thing. Criminals from Portland are coming in and stealing cars and breaking into cars. They're committing thefts, they're committing burglaries, they're committing robberies, they're committing firearms offenses. And we know that statistically because we know who we're prosecuting, and we're prosecuting more criminals from Portland. So as that public safety system falters, the impact comes on us, and we need to address that. Otherwise, Washington County is going to continue to struggle. So I think those are the 3 issues that need to be addressed.
Okay. Mr. Decker?
Thanks. Yeah, I know that those kind of crimes are certainly enough to ruin somebody's day. And depending on who you are, it could be a mild inconvenience. It could be a serious inconvenience. It could, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and working on a shift by shift basis, it could cost you your job if you don't have a working car. It could cost you your apartment. Those are serious considerations. And when people harm each other, we need to hold them accountable for it. When people commit crimes, every single time people commit crimes, we need to hold them accountable. But accountability is not the same thing as punishment for punishment's sake. 9 times out of 10, accountability ought to look a lot more like rehabilitation. Like, how are we going to solve the underlying problem with these people? Yes, we need to make the victim whole. They need to accept the person who harmed them needs to accept responsibility, needs to make sure they never do that again. But we also need to make sure that we're getting the person who caused this harm into the position that they don't do this again. And you're right, that sense of a revolving door, that sense of just spinning our wheels, of doing the same thing over and over and over again. We have the worst rate of that, what's called recidivism, in the metro area here in Washington County, of people reoffending after conviction. The numbers show that Washington County has a higher rate than Multnomah County or Clackamas County because we're not doing enough to actually rehabilitate people. We're just focusing on incarceration first, and folks are going into prison or jail and spending a time there and then coming back out. and they're not any better, any safer, any better contributing members of society when they come back out. They might be better criminals. They might be more traumatized. They might have learned a thing or two, and they keep cycling back through the system. I think that the reason that Kevin Barton doesn't see a problem with us becoming the most punitive, the most carceral county in the state, with us sending more people to prison for more years than any other county, is because of this old and proven failure theory of deterrence as alone the thing that is going to prevent crime. That if you're tough enough, if you appear tough enough, people won't come and commit crimes in your county. Well, why are people from Portland coming into Washington County to commit their crimes if deterrence works? If Washington County is so tough, if Washington County is such a scary place to go to court and you'll get a prison sentence, why are people from Portland coming here to commit crimes? People who are addicted, people who are mentally ill, people who are desperate because of poverty, they don't get deterred from their acts of desperation because they are thinking about the prison sentence. We have to get out in front of these things by actually rehabilitating people, by actually using the resources at our disposal to treat underlying root causes, to go after addiction with treatment programs that are easy to access, trauma-informed, culturally competent, and based in evidence, which is to say effective, and to do it efficiently, to get people into them early. You shouldn't have to sit around in jail for months and go through 5 different court hearings and plead guilty in order to get access to the rehabilitation services they should have had in the first place.
Okay.
That's why our jail is full.
That's our time. Thank you. So thank you both. We've somewhat overcome our technical issues here. So we really appreciate everyone's patience for dealing with them. And we especially appreciate our 2 sets of candidates for being here. So we're going to move on to try to pick up some more pieces of the agenda. Officer McCullough, I believe. Are you there? You've been very patient. We usually have you on at the very beginning of the meeting, which hadn't occurred very much. So we'd appreciate hearing from you. So you must be here for Officer Wilson.
Yeah, that's correct. She's at a DUI conference this week. So refining her skills on DUIs and learning more about them. So I'm covering her NAC. I normally cover the Highland NAC. So some things, since you just got done with some of the prosecutors talking about kind of the judicial system. Since I'm a community service officer, I work with the court. So I might as well elaborate a little bit on Beaverton's unique court, because we're one of the only municipal courts that actually is a court of record. So we prosecute criminal cases as well, which are misdemeanors. We don't do domestic violence. That's handled by Washington County, but we do with most of the DUIs are handled by us, as well as any other misdemeanors. So it's a good thing. We also have specialty courts, like we have a mental health court. Not sure if the other courts have that. So people that we flag as mentally ill and that are receptive for them, we can try to get there so we can either reduce their charges or maybe even resolve them if they are able to comply with the court and meet the court standards. So it's effective. People that go through it, usually that recidivism that they're talking about is a lot less if they're successful in the mental health court. But COVID kind of slowed all that down a lot. Now the court is fully open, so any one of you guys can come in and sit in for open court at any time. It wasn't that way a few weeks ago or a month ago. So it's a good thing. You guys are really lucky as citizens of Beaverton to have that, because we have a city prosecutor. So that a lot of those small crimes that one of the individuals was talking about, our city attorney prosecutor is willing to prosecute those small crimes. So it helps that that we able to prosecute those. So I normally go over the crime stats going with there. So I'll share my screen for 1 second. And let's see here. All right, you folks able to see?
Yes.
Okay, so going over the crime stats. So we got the offenses, assault offenses. We have one simple assault that occurred. Then this is March. This was last month. They do it month to month, the previous month to get the stats. You had 1 vandalism. You had larceny, theft offenses was 2, motor vehicle theft, which was 1, stolen property offense, fencing, which was 2, total of 7 in group A offenses. In group B, you only had 1, which is a driving under the influence. That's a total of 8, which is down from last month. Total for the year is 29, and it's up from last year, which was 7 instead of 8. You guys actually have a higher amount of motorized theft of a vehicle. And I think that's really where you guys are situated at, unfortunately, because you're kind of like that gateway that goes into Portland. In Portland, have a high amount of car theft, so I think they use your neighborhood kind of as like a way to grab a lot of those.
Yeah, my impression is a lot of those are happening at the apartment complexes.
Yeah, so it's a little easier for somebody to walk around and not be looked at really for the most part, because it's not, you don't know if they're coming from an apartment or not. So it's a little easier to blend in versus if somebody's poking around your car at your house, you're gonna know what's going on. So it does happen. But you guys, we're lucky though to be located, like I said, in Beaverton. We're pretty good at responding quickly to any sort of disturbances or anything. Versus somewhere like, if you're going to Portland, you get a lot slower response. So you guys are, I feel like, lucky being located in the city. And Washington County does a good job as well. But Beaverton, we're really quick to respond to a lot of calls for service. So the only other thing I have to cover is that on April 30th, we have our drug take back day at the police department. That's from 9:30 to 2:30. And it is any medication, old medication you have, or maybe you had a loved one that passed away that you realize that a bunch of old medication, you want to safely and responsibly dispose of it. You can bring it to the PD and we will take it and we'll properly dispose of it. We don't take any liquid drugs or syringes. The syringe is more for our safety, and the liquid because it's a little bit difficult to dispose of. So with that, you folks have any other questions for me?
I noticed that I assume it's the traffic bureau that puts the speed sign down at the bottom of Canyon Lane.
Yeah, so the traffic division will determine where it's at, especially if we get complaints coming in, traffic complaints that somebody's speeding. Sometimes they'll do studies too to see if there needs to be more enforcement. So they can track a lot of the speeds. They got different devices that can record the speeds to see like, oh yeah, there really is a problem here, or not so much. It's more or less so they can collect data. So if somebody's saying that, because a lot of times we get complaints that are very dramatized, saying everyone's speeding, and then we put something up there, and then every once in a while we'll clock somebody that's going 20 over. But that versus, but if we saw like, oh yeah, everybody's going 50 over, that's a little bit, then traffic can then say, okay, we need to focus on this area because there's a high amount of speeds and it's dangerous. So we try to do our research before we, really try to enforce an area.
So yeah, I'll mention that I do have the speed gun that's available for anyone from the NAC to check out. I haven't taken that out for a test drive yet, but anyone who feels like there's a lot of speeding going on and they're wanting to go out and actually document it, let me know and you can borrow it.
Yeah, and anybody can always reach out to the PD as well and traffic division. If the Sergeant Shaw is going to be the head of the traffic, he's very good working with any of the individuals that want to reach out and talk to him, or anybody from traffic would be happy to give you any stats or what they have.
What would be, catalytic converter thefts, what would that be listed under the category here?
That would be under theft or larceny. So it can also, so it depends, because you are knowingly also destroying someone's property that's over $1,000. So that's also going to be like it wouldn't be vandalism. It would, because that'd be more criminal mischief. you could think about, because doing damage intentionally to somebody's property would be, or causing great inconvenience, that's because their vehicle's not working. But the purpose is you stole something, so that's theft as well. So it could be a combination of crimes.
So I guess I have a question, and this is probably maybe on everyone's minds. If I look out in my driveway and someone's trying to make off with my catalytic converter.
Yeah.
What can I do?
So it really depends,
And
because
so this is giving me a range of things. I probably, assuming I can't just go out and shoot him or her.
yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't suggest that, especially too, because there's a lot, there's a lot of dangers for discharging a weapon, especially in the city. But the big one is it really depends on, because you obviously you don't know who the person is that's stealing your Cadillac converter, so you have no idea the level of danger you could
They're
potentially
like under
be
the
in.
car, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't know if they're armed or not. And the last thing I want to do is put a citizen in a situation to where they're going to get harmed. So best thing to do is to call us, and you say there's somebody messing with my car. We're pretty quick to respond to those, especially to that we know that catalytic converters are the issue. There has been legislation passed to like try to prevent that, but it still hasn't really been slowing them down too much. A lot of them still are coming in and taking the catalytic converter, but we've been catching quite a few of them, and we're going to keep on at it, and hopefully. And the thing is now, because the COVID restrictions are now a lot lifted, a lot of these individuals now, before maybe they realized down in Portland or different areas that they weren't going to jail, but then when they come to Washington County and do that, now the jail will take them. So they learn pretty quickly that if they get caught, they're going to go to jail. So that's a one of the deterrents.
Okay.
If I may jump in, it seems like it's also the metal recyclers that will accept those that bear a lot of the responsibility. The fence, the fencing, the guys who fence the materials and make the money out and pay the criminals.
Yeah, no, that is a big problem as well. I mean, that, and like I said, that's going to be on the legislators' end, that they can stop them from accepting them. I mean, there's other things they could do, like you could put it on the manufacturer, for example, and serialize the Cadillac converters, which I think would be a good idea. We've had talks about that, like having someone like the car companies just like have a VIN vehicle, have it attached to the Catalytic converter, so it's a little more difficult if you wanted to sell it or fence it. Then there's a serial number associated with it. So, but I mean those are just talks. That could be something that could happen in the future, but right now, yeah, it is a problem. And best thing to do for your guys' safety, if you see something like that happen, just call us and we'll respond to it. Like I said, I don't want to put any citizen in any sort of compromised position to where, you could be seriously hurt or, hurt the other person. We're trained to handle this individual that's either aggressive or, that anything that could be potentially dangerous to someone else.
All right. Any other questions?
All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a great night.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we still have Regina Razzo here still. I think she was on the phone, was very patient, but I think maybe her battery ran out. Anyway, the fire station down at the bottom of the hill, X Station 65, now is a pet daycare location business. So maybe we can get Regina in here next month. That was our plan. So again, there's several new businesses down in the area, and I'd like to include, there's a pet there, maybe going into daycare. So any of the new businesses that you come in contact with, I know there's a record, record store down there, and there's a computer play, a lot of people that we haven't heard from, and it'd be really great, I think. And they are members of the NAC as well, because they're within the NAC area. all the businesses are. And it would be great to give them, 5 minutes or so to kind of shout out about what their business is, so we know what they're doing. All right. Let's see, Terry, did you want to talk about the BCCI?
I do. I have a couple of, two things that I want to talk or mention to our neighborhoods. One is an event that is sponsored by the Beaverton Committee for Community Involvement, BCCI, and it is the Voters Forum. And it is scheduled for April 28th, Thursday, a week from today, at 6:30 at the Patricia Reeser Performing Arts Center, or Center for the Arts, I guess is the name of it. And we have invited city council candidates for each of the 4 races, as well as the Beaverton School District, which has a bond issue on the agenda if you're a member of the Beaverton School District. You do need to acquire tickets to attend the event, but it's an opportunity to check out the Reeser Center if you haven't had an opportunity to see any artists there yet. And you can find tickets very simply by going to the beavertonoregon.gov Voters Forum website, and it has a link there to get tickets. You do need to wear a mask if you want to come to the event in person. That's a Patricia Reeser requirement. The event will be replayed on TVC TV, both channels 28 and 30 in Spanish and English. And there's a very long list of scheduled broadcast times at that Voters Forum link at that city webpage. So anyway, I think it's good to know we have 4 races for city council. So that's kind of a holistic change possible in our city council representation. So I encourage everyone to, if you can't attend in person, to watch one of the rebroadcasts.
Yeah, we weren't able to get the other 2. I think it's position 3, I believe. There's 2.
Yeah, we have a couple of contested races and 2 that are.
So we didn't get them on, and our next meeting is not till after the election. So it'd be good to catch up on those.
Okay. And then I do have another topic. All of us may have received a notice in the mail. Did everybody get one of these?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually,
There will be, this is the Housing Options Project, which I've been mentioning a couple of times. And it is now time for the new code that has been developed over consultation with the public and many interest groups over the last 2.5, 3 years. It is now time to adopt a new code that implements these requirements by the state. And Beaverton has elected to, their staff has been working with, like I said, arduously over the past 3 years, to adopt standards that meld what's called the state model code. In other words, planners at the state came up with code language that cities could adopt, and those, they would know that ordinance, then those city codes would meet the state requirements. But in Beaverton, they elected to do some model code, but some tweaks to reflect specific needs of Beaverton. And so I think, we've come up with, there will be some major changes to zoning. We are reducing what's called the minimum lot size. And the purpose of that is to encourage denser housing and theoretically smaller dwelling units that will be more affordable. And that's the aspiration, is to try to get more affordable housing throughout cities rather than just concentrated in apartment complexes. And so as your notice says the first hearing will be before the Planning Commission on May 11th. And we encourage you to review the materials. There's going to be a lot of material, so I will warn you. But to understand that, I think reading the staff report is always a good place to get a fundamental understanding of what is being proposed and what are the variables that that the city has to work within in adopting this new ordinance. So it's going to be a holistic change in our residential zoning for the city, and all other cities over 10,000 residents are required to comply with this law. So we are one of many, including unincorporated Washington County. They are also adopting rules for this affordable housing.
Terry, how do you see that playing out in West Slope?
Well, interesting in that a lot of the materials point to the West Slope area and Denny Whitford, Raleigh West as being two of the areas of the city that has the least diversity in housing. So what does that mean? What it really means is that if a developer or if anybody wants to redevelop their property, they can add a housing unit. They may be able to have a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, townhomes, or cluster homes on any land that's zoned residential. That's what the state law is. And so what will it mean in West Slope? It may mean that if there's a vacant lot, a developer may buy that lot and build one of these more dense housing types. The housing option code discusses issues about parking. It discusses issues about saving trees. It talks about trying not to shadow or shade out adjoining houses. You know, we've developed language that protects, we call it protecting the neighborhood character, but these will be very different housing types than your 1960s or 1940s ranch style homes. And that is the whole point of, you know, I don't know if you've seen the housing prices in this neighborhood, but they are definitely beyond the reach of any first-time homeowners. And I think, you know, if we allow diversity of housing, then we will be able to enjoy different, we will have different housing types. And those housing types will encourage folks that otherwise can't afford a $800,000 house, which is just kind of crazy. So that's the goal.
Right.
And so I think it will just be played out very slowly. I don't think there's going to be a massive change that you're going to see. But I think that if there's an old house that's falling down, that might be one where a developer may look at that and seize an opportunity to develop multiple housing units.
Okay, yeah, maybe next meeting we can talk about the what happened in the first planning commission.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So yeah, thank you. That's it, unless there's any more questions.
Okay, Franziska, do you have any? And we're past 9, but we're not being kicked out of the school. So for those of you that are willing to hang in there, I'm fine. I had dinner already, so so Franziska probably has not. But do you have any city report?
Yeah, I mean, I recognize the time it is, so I don't want to belabor any points. Terry already talked about the voters forum, so I put the link in the chat there for folks to be able to get tickets. ASL interpretation will be available, Spanish interpretation will be available. So we're really looking forward to our first in-person voters forum in several years. So we hope that you all can join us. And then the only other thing in terms of city updates that I wanted to mention is the city has a new website. So that has launched. So if you go to beavertonoregon.gov, you'll see the city website has an entirely new look to it. And that is, it's just improved technology and improve the user experience, and it will better highlight timely and relevant information in a way that's more intuitive and user-friendly. The thing that I did want to note about that is if you were subscribed to any of the notify me lists, especially for, West Slope NAC, or any other city alerts, or, traffic alerts, whatever the case may be, city news, city events, none of those none of those transferred over to the new website for security reasons. So you'll need to resubscribe to your notifications. So I just wanted to mention that.
Email I've been ignoring. Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably got a bunch of emails if you were subscribed to a bunch of stuff. So those are all legit. And then a couple quick updates regarding, April is Arbor Month. So I'll put a link in the chat where you can see some more information about approved tree lists, tree planting, city street of trees. And then the only other thing related to that is our Highland NAC received the 2022 Oregon Urban and Community Forestry Organization Award. So more NACs doing great stuff and getting recognized for it. So anyway, I know it's late, so I won't go on any further, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, of course.
Okay, let me remind folks, Troy bailed too, since he didn't have his time, but April 30th is the latte in the park. So that's at 9:30 to 11:30. So that's in the greenhouse park area, Pointer Street Park, I guess, Pointer Road Park. So that's when the Spalding Hills folks are going to be there, and supposedly there'll be coffee and snacks. And the first step in getting the community's input. I'll send the distribution out. Let me do, let's see, a couple of other things I had. So and Terry, maybe you and I can talk on this if people have more interest in the new zoning discussion. The other issue that Terry McClellan brought up to me is that looks like Lincoln is trying to move forward on the athletic field project at West Sylvan Middle School. And I guess it might have been during my sabbatical from the NAC, but it sounded like you all had gone down and done the thing at the Planning Commission and the City Council and the whole thing. So I was kind of really out of touch with that. So I guess we probably need to circle back around and see what the options are that we have going too. So that's probably something we might want to talk about at next meeting as well. I have lined up Christian Thorpe, West Slope Community Library librarian, giving a presentation, and as well as I had a plumbing disaster, which is still ongoing actually. Ended up talking to Mike Grimm down at West Slope Water District. So they've been putting a lot of new meters in and things, and sounds like the new meters are probably are easier to break. And if you break them, it's your responsibility and stuff. So to the tune of $1,000. So anyway, Mike's going to be one of our speakers as well. And as it turns out, both Kristen and Mike are not going to be in town, but are going to do remote Zoom. And Phyllis and I actually will be in Page, Arizona. And we're trusting that we would have Zoom access at 6 p.m. in Page. So hopefully I can chair that meeting. But Terry, would you be willing, if I'm a total no-show, would you be willing to take over from that and chair the meeting? I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of give me a heads up.
If I'm a no-show, but
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I'll get the agenda together and all the other stuff.
All right, fair enough.
And I think that's pretty much all I had. Oh, and I've been working with Yurta at West Sylvan Middle School. And so I'm trying to get Principal Jill Hunt to be on one of our meetings. She can't do it in May, possibly in June. At a minimum, she will take questions and take our questions and try to provide answers. So maybe I can coordinate that. But the really good news is we will be starting in September. We have permission to meet Thursday evenings, the third Thursday of every month in the West Sylvan Middle School library.
All right, yay, back
No more
to
sitting on
normal.
Those damn cafeteria benches. Okay, that's all I have. Anyone else have anything?
No, I can ask Chris Swenson. He led the effort for the NAC when the athletic field improvements were going through the process, and he did a masterful job. So I
Right.
know he's really tuned into the proceedings. So I'll ask him to kind of maybe step up and be kind of our primary conduit in the May meeting on that
Yeah,
topic.
Terry sent me, I guess, and it was hard to tell. I couldn't tell how the letter was, but she forwarded a letter from the principal, Lincoln High principal, and she thought this was like within the last week or so. Anyone else familiar with that? I'll send you the materials that Terry sent me to the board.
Okay.
But I mean, that just be a disaster if they try to play major games in there, which it sounded like from the letter they were hoping to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was our problem.
Yep. Okay. All right. Anything else? Thank you all for hanging in there. That's it's the technology is amazing
When it works.
when it works.
Until it isn't.
So Franziska, thank you for all your assistance in getting this going. So hopefully we
I'm
can.
just glad to have recovered in any sort of way the
Yes.
meeting, that candidates were able to be on time and have their sections, and we've recouped.
Yeah.
So-
So other thing I would mention, Bev Swanson is now a board member as well. And so I don't know, do you have a list of people when they upgrade them to panelists? It would, you know, for the people that take the trouble to sign in, I would, for one, certainly when we're doing the introductions at the beginning of the meetings, I talked to Miles about this before. Hi, Bev. I think it'd just be wonderful to actually be able to see everyone. And I'm not sure why we would not want to have video on everyone that's attending. You know, if we get up to 30 or 40 people, I can understand that, but that hasn't been an issue.
Sure. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, when people were transitioning to Zoom, there was a lot of Zoom bombing, especially for governments and like library events. And so the reason that we've used the Zoom webinar platform is to maintain the integrity of the meeting and just, you know, make sure that none of those inappropriate video feeds or audio feeds come through. I mean, it hasn't obviously been an issue, but yeah, I mean, I don't see any issue with, you know, promoting folks to panelists. It's just kind of an additional security measure, so folks can't just hop in and.
But it's, it's kind of I just want to have people feel kind of welcome.
Absolutely.
And you have your
Absolutely.
hand up, it looks like.
Yeah.
You can speak.
I managed to log in on my phone for most of the meeting,
Yes.
and then, but I kept trying online, and it wasn't until about 10 minutes to 9 that it finally opened up and let me in. And I don't know if it is that the Zoom program gets overloaded with too many people trying to get in, or if it is because I'm on Comcast.net
No,
Um,
we were all very excited about 10 minutes to 7 when we were trying to log in and nobody could.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
It's kind of a systemic system problem,
Issue,
I think. So
yeah.
hopefully we won't encounter.
Yeah, because,
It wasn't you. Zoom Gov went down today at some point, and the ripple effect through the network for the remainder of the day has, from what I understand, has been pretty widespread. And so I actually had to take myself off Wi-Fi entirely. I had to connect my laptop to my phone as a hotspot because there's something about whatever network you're using for Wi-Fi, but the phone data was unaffected. So a lot of people, yeah, taking off Wi-Fi seemed to resolve it. I don't know why, but the only instructions that Zoom Gov support was able to give me, I was on the phone with them at the start of this meeting, was to clear your DNS cache. So I don't even know what that was, but they said that resolves the problem. So anyway, so if you want to look up instructions for how to clear your DNS cache, that apparently is what is creating the issue. So I'm not an IT person, but yeah, it was, Bev, you missed a lot of excitement, AKA a lot of stress for the first half hour of this meeting, and some people logging in and being able to, and other people having like no success whatsoever.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all coming, and Franziska will we'll let you go and have an adult beverage and recover from the stress of the day. So thank you all for showing up, and we'll see you next month.
Maybe.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.